Hello and welcome to episode 10 of Reservoir Red Dogs. I'm Matt Ford and I've taken time out of my hectic filming schedule to spend some quality time with my favourite man, Paul McGregor.
That was short, wasn't it? Go on then. I am that man, Paul McGregor, and I've taken time out of my hectic waxing schedule to spend some quality time with you, Matthew. Your fantasies are running wild here. No, there's still more, I know. When I'm not sat in my paddling pool in a full forest kit, I'm thinking about this podcast and the great work we've done for people, the help we've given them, the souls we've saved. When people ask me what charity work I do, I reply with 2 words: Reservoir Red Dogs. 2 words?
It's a joke, isn't it?
When you have to explain it, Matt.
Paul, we owe you a deep debt of gratitude. Thank you very much. Don't forget to thank Paul by leaving us an iTunes review with your favourite Paul McGregor memory in it. Follow us on Twitter at RRD1865 and email the show rrd1865@outlook.com. And we're joined by one of the greatest figures in the entire history of the world's greatest football club, former player, manager and chairman, Frank Clough. Frank, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Matt. That's some introduction.
Well, it's true, though, isn't it?
Follow that.
Very few people will play for a club, manage it, and be chairman.
Yeah, very
I'm
few.
not aware of any others. I'm trying to think of other football clubs now. If anyone else has done
Howard Wilkinson was briefly acting chairman at Sheffield Wednesday and played and managed it. But I don't know anybody else.
Certainly no one else has done it in Forest history.
No.
You had 2 great spells at Forest. Firstly, as a player, winning, part of that wonderful team that basically won everything going, conquered Europe, and then managing really the last great Forest side in the 90s, which was when I was going to watch Forest. I don't want to start on a negative, but I'll never forget.
But I'm gonna.
That first game, your first game in charge, the start of the 93-94 season. Forest had just been relegated. They play away at Roots Hall, Southend away. And Crosley cuts his head open. We go a goal down. At that point, did you think, I've made a huge mistake here?
No, I thought, don't panic.
Because it was a massive job in football, even after relegation, to follow Brian Clough. Was having Clough as a predecessor a big pressure on you?
Not really. Well, I mean, it was there, but I wasn't really too aware of it. The biggest pressure I had was from the board and the supporters. Before I got the job, Fred Ritchie, the chairman, rang me and said, yeah. Frank, you know that Brian's gone. He says, can you help me out? I've been turned down by 5 people. We're desperate. Would you fancy the job?
You're kidding! You're kidding!
No, I'm serious.
Because it was always presumed that you were anointed by Clough.
No, that wasn't... No, he was as surprised as anybody. He didn't know anything about that. When he came out with that statement about me following him, that was typical Brian Clough. That was to help me at Leyton Orient, because at the time at Leyton Orient I was under a bit of pressure.
Yeah,
I was always under pressure at Leyton Orient. And he came out of that, I think, to help me. He thought if he said that, it might, the directors at Leyton Orient might think, oh, Brian Clough likes him. He must be better than we think he is,
So you stayed in touch with Cloughie after playing and during your management years?
Not really in touch. I mean, I used to come across him. We played against him in the FA Cup down at Brisbane Road.
Yeah.
And occasionally I would cross his path, but I didn't really keep in touch with him, no.
What was he like as an adversary? What's it like being in an opposite dugout across the club?
Well, it was typical of him. We played, as I say, it was a cup tie at Brisbane Road, kick off 3 o'clock, and they turned up about 2:30. They'd stop for lunch at Northampton, which is just up the road from Brisbane Road, as you know. And of course, he'd never thought about the London traffic. And they literally got to the ground about 2:30. Everybody was panicking, are they coming, are they not coming? And they won the game. I think they beat us 2-1, but it was a good game. And he had a drink, and we were okay. Yeah.
Did having played for him help you prepare to manage against him?
Well, it did. My knowledge of the club helped me as well. I mean, I knew a lot of the people who were still at the club who'd been there when I was a player. I knew the ethos of the club. I knew most of the directors, most of the backroom staff. That all helped. But there were a lot of problems, I mean, the club was in disarray. The king is gone. Oh, my God, what's going to happen now? There's a real air of despondency over the place. The ticket office manager had been sent to jail.
What?
For that summer, for flogging tickets, whatever.
No way. I don't remember that.
And remember that old programme on Granada television called World in Action.
Yes.
They had a team based permanently in Nottingham trying to dish the dirt on the bung scan, which
Yes, I remember
which
that,
was
yeah.
going on, you know.
Yeah.
And they'd be doorstepping the staff. Liam O'Kane, regularly, there were people outside his house trying to get him to do an interview and that kind of thing.
My God.
Which was disgraceful, really.
Yeah.
A number of my staff had to go down and be interviewed by the tribunal that were looking at the bungs inquiry. So it was difficult. Plus I had 3 international players who wanted to leave. So there were a few problems. But I knew that the foundations were basically quite solid. That there was a decent group of players there. And the other pressure, of course, was the board said, "Oh, by the way, none of this rubbish about consolidation. We've got to get back straight away this season. Oh, and there's no money to spend." Oh, thanks for that. But they did say, whoever you sell, you'll be able to spend that, and they kept the word on that, you know.
So Keane went in that summer, brought in Collymore, you know, one of the greatest signings in Forest
Keane,
history.
there was no chance of keeping Roy. You know, he had a clause in his contract, which they'd given him the previous year to get him to sign a new contract, really, which said if the club got relegated, he could leave if a club paid $3.5 million for him, which he would get 10% of. So as soon as I saw that clause, I thought, well, I'm struggling here.
Yeah.
Especially as about the second phone call I got after I got the job was from Sir Alex, then only Alex, who said, "Now then, Frank, congratulations, wish you well in the job. Now about that clause in Roy Keane's contract." So I said, "Well, you know what it says, Alex. Get your chairman to ring mine and agree the fee, and you can talk to him." And it took 2 or 3 weeks to go through. So he was always going to go. Nigel obviously was going to go because of the politics.
Yeah.
And Piercy wanted to go. Piercy was worried about his England place. So I knew I couldn't keep Roy and Nigel, but I thought I've got to try and keep Piercy like that.
And how did you convince him to stay?
Well, I spoke to the England, I think the England manager then was Graham Taylor.
It was, yeah.
Spoke to Graham about it, and he said, well, if he's playing well, he'll be in the squad. Not, you know, worry about that. Like.
Brilliant.
So I was able to reassure Stuart on that issue, and we gave him a new contract, which was a bit of a nightmare for me because I had to do all the negotiating, and him and his agent were absolute nightmare to negotiate. And it took months, but eventually he signed it and he agreed to stay, and that was a big thing.
Yeah, it was.
He was great for me as a captain. I brought in a fitness trainer,
Pete
Edwards,
Pete Edwards.
who was a bit of a, wasn't he?
A bit of a what?
Well, he was. I don't know what phrase I could use on here really.
Any phrase you like?
Let's say he could get up people's noses very easily. Okay. But he was very good at what he did, and that was something new, wasn't it, at the club? You know.
Diet and fitness.
And it was quite difficult to get that across to the players, especially as the early results weren't very good. You know, in October we were in the bottom 6, I think. But Piercy was great. He never moaned. He never questioned it. He just got on and did it. And if the lads saw him do it, it helped that they would do it as well. So he was terrific for me.
He got some stick feet, didn't he?
Oh, yeah, but thick-skinned. he was thick-skinned.
I just remember Woney with him. Oh.
Yeah, Woney. Yeah, well, Woney was a big problem when I first got there. Him and I used to argue all the time.
What about?
Well, I didn't think he worked hard enough. Ian was a great talent,
Yeah,
who'd been in non-league until he was 23, 4. In fact, there's a story there. I went to watch him play somewhere down in deepest Essex. I was at Orient, and a guy I knew in the northwest had said, "You want to go and look at this kid, Warren, playing for Northwich Victoria or somebody like that." Yeah. And they had played a cup replay against some team that was, well, if you looked over the edge of the pitch, you were in the North Sea. It was that far down in Essex. I went to watch him play, and he had great talent. I thought, he'll do for me, like.
Wow.
And so I sorted it all out, and I'm sitting in my office at Orient, waiting for Ian to come down and sign a contract. I get a call from Ronnie Fenton. "Now then, Frank, about this Ian Warne." Yeah, I says, "Good player on." I says, "But you're too late. He's come to sign for me today." He said, "Well, he's here now in our office." Oh, thanks for that, Ron.
But you got to manage him in the end.
Yeah. But he was a bit lazy, with great talent, you know. And we used to fight quite a lot. But eventually we became, well, not friends. It's hard to be a friend when you're the manager, but we had great respect for each other because he really knuckled down here. And my third season there, after Stan had left, he did so well that he was on the fringes of being called up for England, you know.
Yeah, he was the goals he scored were incredible. Screamers, all of them.
Yeah, it was interesting. I had to encourage him to come and get involved more. Because when he played for Brian had fixed ideas about, which weren't bad. Like, he did win a few trophies with him, you know. He was insistent that Ian worked up and down the left-hand side and stayed out there and left room, really, for Piercy to come rampaging through there. And I tried to encourage him to come off the line more and get involved in and around the penalty area. And I think he got 14 goals in that season, God. You know, which was terrific for a wide player. So he ended up, me and him ended up having a great respect for each other. And the catalyst was Brian Roy coming.
Yeah, Roy was superb.
Because when I signed Brian Roy, my idea was to play Brian Roy as a left-sided attacker. And Ian must have looked at that and thought, well, I'm going to be the one to get left out here. Well, he ain't going to get my place. And he really became a better player because he reacted to that. Brian didn't really want to play there.
Yeah.
I found that out very early. He would much be happier stood up there with Stan, watching us defend and go and get us a goal. So it all worked out.
He was a great signing, Roy. How did you convince him to come to Forest?
Well, he didn't take a lot of convincing. His wife did. His wife was an aspiring actress.
Right.
And, I mean, it's an interesting story. I actually flew to America to watch him play when he was playing. He was in the World Cup with Holland.
Right, yeah.
That was in America in '94. So I've been trying to negotiate. I negotiated a fee with a club with Foggia, the Italian club he was at. And I wanted to get to him as quickly as I could before anybody else heard about it. So the agent said he'd spoken to the Dutch team manager and said I could meet him. He could come out of the camp and I could meet him and discuss the thing with him in America. So I get on a plane, fly to Miami, get off the plane, and the agent's waiting for me. He said, I've got some bad news for you. The manager's changed his mind.
What?
You can't see him. But the good thing is, you can go and watch the game they're playing tomorrow night. Oh, I said, great. He said, and even better news is you can travel on the official Dutch coach with all the Dutch officials, because Brian's agent was actually the son of the father, a bit complicated, of the Dutch FA, who was the chairman of the Dutch FA. So I actually went to the game, but he said, when you get on the coach, keep your head down. So I'm sat at the back amongst all the wives.
Full Forest kit.
Who am I sitting next to? With Brian's wife.
Ah. Wow.
So we chatted away, and she says to me, how far's Nottingham from London? Oh,
half an hour.
No way! No.
I said about half an hour and a fast car. So whether that helped or not, I don't know.
Wow. Oh my word. What a great story. Brian Roy was a great signing. In the summer of 1993, he signed Stan Collymore, who only 2 seasons at Forest, but probably more impact in those 2 seasons than any Forest players ever had over 25 goals a season, got us in the Premier League, got us to finish third. It's such a natural talent, but a difficult man to manage. Is that fair?
That's an understatement. a very difficult man to manage. I'd known all about Stan because Stan was when it was at Crystal Palace, but couldn't get in the team at Crystal Palace, was playing in the reserves.
Yeah. And
I used to watch loads of football combination games when I was at Orient, because that was the market that we were looking at. So I'd seen a lot of them in Palace reserves, and I really thought he was a good player. I think he had problems at Palace. At that time, Palace had a very, very sharp dressing room. Paul will know what I mean about dressing rooms. All dressing rooms are different.
Yeah.
And when you go in there, you've got to be able to deal with what's going on in there, you know.
Got to find your place, haven't you?
Yeah, and I found that when I went to Leyton Orient, I couldn't believe the sharpness of the dressing room. It was a bit different from what I'd been used to, you know. Anyway, long story short, Southend paid 150,000 for him. May as well have been 10 million for us at Orient. We couldn't match that anyway. So when I came up here, I knew that myself, but straight away Alan Hill and Liam said, we've got to get a striker. And Brian had actually looked at signing Stan the season before, but there was no way Brian and the chairman at Southend, Vic Jobson, who I knew very well, were ever going to agree about anything. They wouldn't even be able to agree about the weather, let alone a transfer deal. So it never went through. So we got straight onto that and agreed the fee straight away. Stan had been on holiday with his girlfriend, and she lived in Croydon. So we're flying back to Gatwick, obviously. So I went down to meet them in Croydon somewhere. But typical of Stan, I wasn't sure where I was supposed to meet him. He wasn't sure where he was going to be. So I'm driving around Croydon. He's driving around Croydon with his girlfriend and an agent called Ambrose Mendy, who you might know used to be a boxing agent and a boxing promoter in London. He was chasing him, trying to get him to sign up. So I'm trying to get him before he gets it. Anyway.
Is this pre-mobiles?
Must have been. I would think so, yeah. Anyway, I managed to get to his girlfriend's house, and he was there, and we got the deal done, and he was easy to negotiate with. You know.
And then he signs for Forest. He has just such a huge impact. What was he like to manage as an individual?
Oh, it was a problem all the time. But you know, he had so much talent. It was worth it. I could have fined him every week, really, for something. And what I decided very early on that if I chummed down on him too hard, it might be counterproductive. So I got Pearce, Cooper, Colin Cooper, Chettle, who were all good senior pros and like the senior pros in the dressing room. I got them in. I said, "Listen, I've got a problem with Stan. Oh, don't worry about it, Gaffer. We're okay. We know that. Don't upset him too much because he'll win us a game next Saturday." I mean, I let him off for loads of things. I could have been finding him out. I mean, this is how daft he was. Like, he didn't come in one day and he said with his grandmother's funeral.
I remember this.
Fair enough. Yeah. So Alan Hill, who's a lovely man, Alan was my assistant. Yeah. Alan being Alan, sent Stan's mother a bunch of flowers. And she rang up and said, "Alan, well, thank you very much. Lovely bunch of flowers, but why did you send them?" You know? Oh, no. And Alan said, "Well, you know, because your mother's died." And she said, "Alan, my mother died 10 years ago." Which was kind of typical of stuff. Yeah. But, I mean, you couldn't help but like him, really. But he was difficult. I mean, he fell out with all the lads, you know. We had that period when he wasn't speaking to Laws and Brian and about 3 others in the team. I mean, that was the period when we went to Sheffield Wednesday and won 7-1 at Sheffield Wednesday. They weren't speaking to each other.
So what was the cause of the breakdown? Why wasn't he speaking to
Stan? He was difficult. He was difficult.
See, I really got on with Stan. So we'd go out and
well, you're a bit off the ball as well, aren't you?
A little bit, yeah. Literally. But kind of how I saw it was quite... Not similar to me, obviously, in many ways, but he was similar as in he had a group of friends that he would always go back to in Cannock.
That he trusted.
There was a group of schoolmates that'd go back and they'd go to that pub, there's something Frog in Cannock, I can't remember what it was called. Yeah. I went there once. And I just think, you know, we would all, like with Coops and Chets, we'd all go up to Ginzer's or whatever with the girlfriends. And there was a little clique
without, as the case may be.
Well, not often up at Ginzer's. But I just think he had that. And I had that, you know, with a good group of schoolmates and being from Nottingham, a family were all here and all that. So when the lads would all be going to Ritz's, I wouldn't necessarily be doing that. I'd be, you know, back with my mates in the Sherwin Arms in Bramcote or whatever. So I understood that a little bit about him.
Yeah, he was very distrustful of people. With his talent, he should have been snapped up and at a big pro club from the age of 15, 16. Yeah. But it never happened. He played non-league in and around the Cannock area, and then ended up down at Palace.
I mean, it's tricky. I imagine being a football manager when you've got numerous roles. Firstly, is to pick a side, have a philosophy, and play a particular way, and everyone understanding their role. The other part of it is the psychology element of it, of how to manage different egos and different personalities in different ways.
That's right.
Dealing with Stuart Pearce is different to dealing with Stan Collymore, is different to dealing with Paul McGregor. What was the way to manage Paul?
Thanks for that.
Yeah, I'm interested.
Yeah, well, the way to manage Paul would be pick him in the team, go home and try to sleep and not worry about it the next day.
But was he a good professional? Was he a good boy?
He was. I never had any problems with him. I worried that he got too interested in rock music and rock bands that took his focus away, possibly from the football. But that's only my assumption, because I left. When I left, he'd been in the team. He'd done okay. He hadn't been in the team every week, but he was in the team. I mean, when we played,
do you want me to leave?
No. I'm going to give you a compliment now. When we played Leon in the UEFA Cup,
yeah.
And I took 2 internationals off and put Paul and Bobby Howe on,
right, yeah.
and they won us a game and got hammered by the media afterwards. Like, how could you take 2 internationals off and put the kids? I said, well, hang on, who got the goal? Like, did we win the game or not? So he could play, and I thought he was going to be a player. What happened after I left, I mean, I don't know. You would know better than me. But I, from the outside or from a distance, I just got the impression that kind of rock music took over a little bit,
Do you think that's true? Do you think your head was turned a little bit?
I have to say I don't. I think there's a misconception.
I've got loads of those. Which one would you like?
At the time, though, I was really into music, as you are.
Yeah.
But the majority of the lads would be going off to these places like Black Orchid or Ritz's, wherever, where it was an absolute free for all, and it just wasn't my scene. So I'd be rehearsing with my mates, having a couple of beers, and just getting this reputation that it's because of Oasis was happening, and I was this rock and roll, and I really wasn't. I was quite the opposite.
That was unfair.
I think it was a little bit at the time, yeah. And trying to beat that down since, but afterwards, I think my head got turned a little bit, because I then went to Plymouth, and then I went to Northampton. But when I was at Northampton, my band was based in London, and we started doing quite well, and the name of the band hit the front page of the Enemy and all this kind of stuff. So I got to 28, where I was like, well, Hull were, I don't know where Hull were, but I think Hull or Grimsby offered me a contract as well, and I just thought, do I go and have a go in London at something I want to do? Or do I go to Hull and Grimsby? Yeah. I live on my own in Grimsby somewhere. I can't do that anymore.
Well, I understand. All I thought was, I mean, I don't know the reasons why it didn't work out for you at Forest.
Well, I snapped my knee like 3 days before or after you left.
Right. Well, that didn't help, obviously.
No. And then we had 3 managers by the time I was back fit, and I wasn't getting recognised in the corridors.
Mad. That's mad.
Horror, literally, you're back in the reserve room. Right. Lads are taking the mick in the reserve room, and I was not getting recognised. I mean, Ron Atkinson walked on the training ground. The first thing he did when he walked on was said, right, let's see who we've got here, because I don't want any beep and rock and roll stars in my team.
Really?
And sent me back up, and I was like,
what?
Oh, okay. Your blood drains from you, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And you're just like, oh. I mean, when Bassett was there, I scrapped and got myself back. I mean,
yes, I remember.
Didn't help, like I say, that I got done for inciting a riot at Portsmouth. First game back.
Not a good career move.
No. The dressing room got raided by the police. Give us McGregor. That doesn't help. I didn't get in the first team squad after that. But Ron Atkinson killed me, and the whole Piercy was, after you left, he was there. So it was, and I was injured. 6 months out.
Yeah,
it pulled the rug out a little bit.
Yeah.
What are your memories of being managed by Frank, or Frank as a manager?
Well, again, I'll repay the compliment. Really, really positive. I mean, when we were out in Europe, I always tell this story because I love it. I just thought, wow, we got such a cool gaffer. We were, your bag was down at the airport, and you were the boss, so I wouldn't go up and have a chat with the gaffer. But your bag was open. There was the Danny Sugarman book, No One Here Gets Out Alive.
Right.
About the Doors.
Yeah.
All right.
Massive Doors fan. So I was like, how cool is the gaffer? So have you read that, boss? And you're like, yeah, it's a good book, And I was like, oh yeah, I've read that, and the big posters on my wall of like Jim Morrison and stuff. So I just loved it. And then the first Christmas do, there you are on the stage with an acoustic guitar banging out Blade and Racers. And I'm just like, who is this guy? He couldn't have been more perfect for me. And you gave me my chance, and you gave me, I'd argue with Plymouth, but you gave me some of the best years of my life. But you gave me a shot and brought me into the first team, and those memories that I have of that were were phenomenal.
That week, well, and I remember it clearly, we talk about that week so often, but Lyon one day, where you score the winner, and then you score against Man United a few days later.
Then the reses. You stuck me in the reses.
Got to keep your feet on the ground, haven't you?
I think it might have been in between. No, it was the Tuesday, wasn't it? It was Lyon.
Yeah.
And then it was, I think I might have played a half in the reses on the Wednesday.
That was just it. Well,
thanks for that.
That was to keep you going. You only came on as a sub against Lyon.
I did, yeah, fair enough.
So was that? Would you occasionally? Because it's a very, we talk about Clough a lot on this podcast, obviously, and his mind games and complimenting people when they thought they were going to get a telling off and telling people off when they thought they played well. Would you ever try and play mind games to people? Was putting Paul in the reserves after big games a deliberate way to keep his feet on the floor and not just about fitness?
Yeah, I'm not saying I try to be like Brian Clough. That would be foolish, But I always believe everybody is a product of all their experiences in life.
Yes.
You meet people, you work with people, you have friends, you come across people, and you take all this stuff in, and then it comes out as yours. If you try and be too much like somebody else, then you get found out very quickly, And obviously Brian was just like special and a complete one-off,
You played for him, obviously, and won, the European Cup twice and League Cups.
No, only once. I retired. The Malmo game was my last game of football.
Incredible! What a way to bow out. Had you made that decision prior to that?
No, I'd never thought about it. Well, I had thought about it. I'd start to get the odd hamstring strain.
Yeah.
I'm thinking, well, your body's telling you it might be time to, because I was nearly 36 by then.
Crikey!
And I played against Malmo, and I still had another year left on my contract. I'm happy to see that out. I knew I wouldn't be a regular starter. I mean, I hadn't been a regular starter for a year, I was just lucky every time a cup final came around, somebody was injured. and I got in, And then in that summer I got a phone call from a lad called Ken Knighton, who'd just got the manager's job at Sunderland. And I hardly knew Ken, really. I'd met him on an FA coaching course the previous summer, but I didn't really know him. And he offered me the assistant manager's job at Sunderland. And I knew the potential at a club like Sunderland, having played just down the road. I thought I could fancy that, man. So I went to see Brian, spoke to him about it, and he tried to talk me out of it. And he offered me another year, so I was going to have another 2 years contract. And he was honest enough. He said, I want you to stay here. You'll be a great influence on the young players. You won't be a starter in the first team, which, I knew that. But I want you here as a player for 2 years. And I thought about it, and I just thought, well, it's the right time, your leg, you're on problems with your muscles, and you've just won the European Cup. Couldn't be a better time to go. So I went back to him and I said, yeah, I'd like to go, boss. He said, well, before you make a decision, I've got a coaching weekend in the Northeast. I'd like you to come with me and help me. And I said, I ain't too sure about that, boss. He says, you're still my player. You're coming with me. So I went up to do this weekend with him, and he spent the whole bloody weekend trying to talk me out of it, But I'd made my mind up by then. And so that was my last game, Malmo. Yeah.
It's interesting you talk about the hamstring problem, because in the film I Believe in Miracles, there's a great story about he told you off for jogging.
Oh, yeah.
He would tell you off for warming, and actually, you played an entire season without injury.
2 seasons.
Wow.
When I came down here, I was 31. And I'd seen an interview by Muhammad Ali. Somebody had said to him, now that you're getting older, because he would, do you train less? And he said, no, I actually train more. I have to train more. So I thought, well, if it's good enough for him, it's good enough for me, So I came down here, and to be fair, the pre-season was really hard. Don't let anybody kid you that he didn't believe in hard work.
Yeah.
Pre-season was really hard around Woollerton Park and all that kind of thing. And but once the season started, we used to get a lot of time off, which was great in a way. But I didn't like having, if I played on a Saturday, I didn't like not doing anything until a Tuesday or a Wednesday. I didn't think that was right, And sometimes if you'd say after a Saturday, I'll see you Thursday, So I just thought I'll just go out on the roads. I was living in Loudon then. I'll just go out on the roads and just run about, not do anything too energetic. Literally just get the stiffness and out of my legs, And I'm running around the roads. Anyway, I've been doing this for about a month or so. A bloke wrote a letter to the newspaper, Post I think it was, who said, what a good pro that Frank Clark is. I've seen him in his spare time out running around the roads. And
grassed you up.
And I'm thinking, oh, great, that'll do for me, that's good. Like. Anyway, then I go in and, hey, I want to see you. He said, when I tell you to have a day off, have a day off. If I hear about it again, I'll find. I said, boss, I said, I'm telling you. So...
Would have probably rather you'd been in the pub.
Yeah, you probably would, yeah. Being the sort of lad who used to always do as he was told,
yeah.
I said, oh, all right, so I stopped doing it. 2 years later, almost 2 years later, at the end of my second season, when we got promoted from the old second division,
yeah.
I played 100 consecutive games, never missed a game.
Wow.
And he called me in at the end of that second season, and he said, who is right now then? And I'd forgotten what you're talking about. I said, I don't know what you mean, boss. He said, remember that conversation we had about doing extra training and running on the... Fair enough.
Wow.
Incredible attention to detail, yeah.
How would he treat you? Did he have a particular way of managing you?
Yeah, he left me alone.
Why was that, do you think?
Well, because he knew what he was getting when he signed me.
Yeah.
Well, he knew I was cheap as well, which he was quick to mention. And he knew what he was getting. If I say so myself, I was a great pro. Like, you know?
Yeah.
If that's one thing I was a good pro. Not the most talented footballer by a million miles, but I was a good pro, and I always looked after myself, always did things properly. And he said to me, he said, because I'd been captain at Newcastle the previous year, he said, you won't be the captain, by the way. He said, I've got a good captain, John McGovern, but he said, I just want you to be you. Worry about yourself, keep yourself right, and you'll be a good example around the place, like, you know. And he was right, because my last couple of years at Newcastle had turned a little bit, not sour, but the club was a bit lax. A lot of players had problems with the club, and I took the captaincy thing too seriously, and I was fighting everybody's battles. Yeah. At the club, you know, and I think I'd probably become a bit of a nuisance, which might be one of the reasons to give me a free transfer. So it was an absolute delight for me to be at a club where I just had to worry about myself.
Yeah.
I knew that, obviously, that you had faith in the management to do things right, and he just left me alone. Trusted me to look after myself, and in fact, he got sick of seeing me because when I was out of the team, I was always going in. Why am I not in the team, you know? And he kept saying, listen, I'm bringing in great players around you to just relax and enjoy it, you know? But I wanted to be in the team, but, you know.
And did you find him intimidating? Because a lot of players wouldn't have dared knock on his door.
Oh, yeah, everybody found him a bit intimidating, yeah. I mean, a great story about when we played Malmo, my best friend had been playing in Sweden, a lad called Joe Jakes, playing in Sweden, doing a bit of coaching. And he wrote me a letter about Malmo, about how he thought Malmo would play and what the things we might do to help us, you know. And I've got this letter, Paul, you can appreciate this. I'm thinking, shall I tell him? Because he wasn't, you know, he usually didn't worry too much about who we were playing. I mean, he never mentioned the opposition, you know. I thought, shall I tell him? I'm trying to pluck up the courage to mention it. I had the letter for about 3 weeks now. I thought, I've got to tell him. I said, boss, I've had this letter about Malmo.
I'm nervous for you already.
He said, what? He said, don't want anything about that. Throw it away. I'm not interested in that. just dismissed it out of hand.
You played for Forest, your last game's against Malmo, and then actually it feels like a completely different time to me. It's only 14 years later you come back to manage Forest.
It seemed like an age to me.
It was just two completely different periods in English football, really, and so much had changed in that time. We talked about Collymore, we talked about Brian Roy, some great signings in there. You also signed Andre Silenzi.
You promised you wouldn't mention him.
But I've got to ask because people would want to. I know it's awkward, but people would want to know. People would want me to ask.
Before I answer that, let me tell you a story about that. My daughter, my youngest daughter, Nikki, who you knew, met this lad, and they got engaged. You know, great lad he is. Anyway, about the second or third time I met him, he didn't take a lot of interest in Forest because he's an Arsenal supporter. But apart from that, he's a great lad. And obviously, he was trying to, make an impression on me. So he said, he said, Forest, he said, that must have been an interesting time when you were the manager and after that and when you left and all that. He said, but he said, very strange, he said, who was the plonker who signed that hand residency? I said, Duncan, that was me. Well, listen, I'll tell you what happened. Stan had gone, obviously.
Yeah.
I'd signed Kevin Campbell, which was a classic case of hubris on my part. That line, we'd finished third in the Premier League.
Yeah.
And I'd got a bit Charlie Big Boots. I thought I could rule the world here.
Yeah.
We've got Kevin, Brian Roy, and Jason Lee.
Yeah.
They're our 3 strikers. I've kept some of the money, Collymore money, for an emergency, rainy day. So we're going on a pre-season tour, and Jason comes to see me. Kevin was injured, and Brian Roy was injured. Jason's my only striker. Were you and Paul? Were you
Forget
in the
me,
first
doesn't
team?
matter.
You weren't in the first team squad there.
I went to Sweden. I was
Yeah.
on the verge of being in the squad.
Yeah, because we had nobody else.
This is already my favourite episode.
So
Broken.
So Jason comes to see me. He said, "Boss, I can't go on this trip." I said, "What do you mean you can't go on this trip? You're my only..." Oh, he said, "I think, did his wife have twins?"
They had twins, yeah. Twin boys.
Just had them, and she's on her own. He said, "I can't leave her on her own. I don't think she can cope with it, So I'm looking around at the dressing room. I looked at him and I panicked. And
I would too, to be fair, looking over at me back then.
This Italian agent told me about Silenzi, who at the time was in the Italian squad.
He was playing with Maradona.
Believe it or believe it not, was playing for Torino and was in the Italian international squad. He said he's available, and I rang Don Howe to ask about him. Don had seen him playing. Don gave him a good recommendation. I watched a couple of videos of him, and I thought, yeah, he'll do for us. So I went across to Turin to negotiate the deal. I had to do all this kind of stuff with the Presidente of Turin, a typical kind of Italian.
Yeah. Godfather.
Godfather. Yeah, I'm not saying he was, but
Just
that was
Be a horse's head in your bed when you get home.
Exactly. So I'm sat in this room with him and the agent and a couple of his assistants, whatever they are. Anyway, so we did the deal, and it didn't work out. It was a disaster. He was all right.
He's a lovely lad, Andy.
Don't forget, he was the first ever player to come from Serie A to
That's
England.
right. Yeah, first.
And he couldn't deal with the whole scenario.
Yeah.
Like an example, when he got injured, I said, "I want you to play in the reserves tomorrow." The reserves? In Italy? I do not play in the reserves. I said, "Well, you bloody do here, and it just never worked for him, And it was a bit of a disaster, really. And what made it a worse disaster, after I left, he went home to Venice and refused to come back.
My God.
Which, can't understand that. Why would you want to stay in Venice?
It's time now for Fan on the Phone, and we're very lucky that this week's Fan on the Phone is a highly decorated sports journalist winning 2 major journalism awards on the same night from The Guardian. It's Daniel Taylor. Danny, hello.
Hello, how you doing?
Very good. Firstly, congratulations on your awards. And it's not the first time you've won these ones, is it?
Thanks very much. Appreciate that. I didn't get to bed till about 4, so apologies for a little bit delicate, but yeah, first trophy for Forest this season. But yeah, no, it's nice. But I mean, to be fair, the Guardian did well overall. We got the Guardian Sports Desk got the Sports Website of the Year and the Paper of the Year as well. And we won 7 awards last night, so it was great for the Guardian. Oh,
fantastic! Well done to all involved. I'm joined as always by Paul McGregor and on this show by Frank Clark. I'll come on to those in a second. Do you remember your first Forest game, Danny?
I do. It was a particularly drab 1-1 draw against Coventry City. I went with my dad and stood in the Bridgewood end. There was nothing brilliant about it, but obviously just addicted from that point onwards, really. And then, been going ever since, and just wish the season tickets were as cheap when I was younger as they are now.
It's brilliant, that, isn't it?
It's amazing. It's very good. Well done for plugging that. What are your memories of Clarkey, Danny?
Well, I don't want to embarrass him if he's there, but I had some of my great...
I won't be embarrassed, Danny, don't worry.
yeah, okay, well, I'll embarrass him, but I honestly had some of my greatest ever times with that team that Frank Clark had. It was, and I think if it wasn't for the fact we all obviously raved back to the Brian Clough years, that team was like incredibly exciting to watch, with Collymore, Roy, Baheen, and
McGregor.
It was just... but also it was the perfect age range for me, because I was a little bit too young to go away with Forest in the glory years, to Europe. But me and my mates, we had some of the best times of our lives, basically following Forest around Europe with that team. Well, I was going to say Malmo, but we actually went to Copenhagen with about 300 Forest fans the night before Malmo, and we went to France with them. We went to Munich, obviously, and we had some amazing times. And I still, to this day, think that if Collymore hadn't got injured in the November of that season, that we might have even got closer to win the league. We finished third, which for a team that had been promoted, if you can imagine a team promoted finishing third in the current football world, it's pretty unheard of. And I don't sometimes think that Frank doesn't get the credit he deserves for that team.
Very kind of you to say that, Danny.
Is that okay, Frank?
Yeah, that's very kind of you.
I want more than a fiver for that.
I'll buy you a drink next time I see you.
Yeah, it sounded like he was reading that off a pre-printed sheet. And what are your abiding memories of Paul McGregor, Danny?
Well, it was just pretty much the same era, really, and he was a very exciting guy and a cool bloke as well.
Told you, boss. See?
You don't often get people who were like really into music and football. It's normally one or the other, and I think all of us there actually like them both. But yeah, and just a great guy. Scored some really important goals, and I've never actually met Paul, so I'm looking forward to meeting you, Paul. But I hear great things about him.
Yeah, that'll be a pleasure. Let's do that next time you're up.
It's disappointing in the flesh, Danny.
Oh, really? Okay.
Oh, God. Oh, goodness. It's brutal in here. Danny, an absolute pleasure talking to you, mate, and congratulations on your awards.
No problem. Thanks ever so much. Cheers, everyone.
Well done, Danny.
Well done,
Speak to
Danny.
you soon, mate.
Is it weird, actually, the dynamic between you two, whenever you see former players, when you see former managers? Is it like seeing a teacher? Is there still that deference to the authority?
Well, on the bus on the way in, that's exactly what I was thinking. But, I mean, we've bumped into each other quite a few times, so it breaks down over the years. But it's the Gaffer. When I was there, I was a kid still. He was, and I can still remember some of the rollickings.
I find it really nice is a bit of a pathetic word, but that they still think like that. Ian still calls me Gaffer, and Stuart and Colin Cooper, and we've got had a really, considering I was a manager, it's difficult to be, as I said, to be too close to players. I think that's great,
We had a lot of messages from people when we announced that you were coming on, Frank. Lots of people with some very happy memories. One message in particular caught my eye from a guy called John Petch on Twitter. He said, "Frank's garden backs onto my mates in Keyworth. Can you ask him to keep his conifer trees pruned?"
Well, I don't live there anymore. I moved. I got sick of pruning the conifers, so I moved. But yeah, I did have a problem with a fella at the bottom of the garden. We did resolve it amicably, I think.
Well, the legacy's still there.
Right.
There's one last question. It's from a guy called Dale. He was a mascot in a game in 1994. And she's looking back at the photos of the day. There's something that I hope Paul or Frank can help with. I have the photo of myself stood in the changing room with the whole team behind me. The thing that's been racking my brain for ages is a large proportion of the players are stood with their hands made into fists and stacked on top of each other as if they're playing one potato, two potato. Why is this? Was it some kind of ritual? Unfortunately, the photo's currently in the loft, so I can't send it over. I mean, go into the loft. I mean, you could have gone into the loft, right? So that's the secondary thing. Does that ring any bells, this one potato thing?
I can't remember that one. I must have been out by then.
Maybe it was just a one-off on the day.
Strange one, that one.
Yeah,
I can't answer that one, sorry.
End with an air of mystery hanging in the air. Frank, this has been, I mean, I love every episode of this. This has been by far my favourite. And I wish we could, hopefully you come in again, because there's so much more I would love to ask you about. It's been really
I'm always
special.
available. I'm not too busy these days.
Okay, well, brilliant. Right, next episode with Frank Clough. We'll pick it up. Frank, thank you so much for coming in.
Pleasure, man.
Cheers, Gaffer.
Absolute pleasure. And with you, Paul. Good to see you both.